Empty deserts once pulsed with the footsteps of countless caravans. Beneath the shifting sands of the Sahara, the Gobi, and the Arabian Peninsula lies a hidden network of ancient trade routes, a forgotten web that connected the world. These paths moved far more than luxury goods. They carried entire cultures, spreading technologies, languages, and beliefs across continents. By the end of this journey, you will understand how these desert highways fundamentally shaped human civilization. We will uncover cities that vanished without a trace and decipher how societies mastered the world's harshest environments. What does the endurance of those ancient travelers tell us about our own drive to connect? The story begins not with grand empires, but with small bands of nomads navigating an impossible world. Survival in the desert meant movement, a constant search for water and pasture. Yet within this struggle, a spark of commerce was born. A tribe in one region might have access to a rich vein of flint, perfect for crafting tools, while another group controlled a salt pan, that most vital of minerals for preserving food. The first trades were likely hesitant, conducted at neutral oases, but they revealed a profound truth. Scarcity in one place could be answered by abundance in another. This simple realization turned barren expanses into landscapes of opportunity. The true revolution, however, arrived on four legs. The domestication of the camel around 3,000 years before the Common Era changed everything. These remarkable animals were not just beasts of burden, they were biological marvels engineered for the desert. They could go for days without water, their wide feet did not sink into the sand, and they could tolerate the extreme shifts in temperature. With a camel, a journey that was once a desperate gamble became a calculated risk. Traders could now plan routes, carrying heavier loads of goods over much greater distances. This was the moment the first true corridors began to form, paths worn into the earth by countless footsteps and hoofprints. What drove these people to risk everything? It was a combination of sheer necessity and the powerful allure of connection. They were not just trading stones and salt, they were trading ideas, news, and technologies. A new method for weaving cloth or a unique design for a pot could travel these routes as surely as any physical object. This foundational era, born from environmental pressure and human ingenuity, set the stage for everything that was to come. It proves that the most hostile environments can become the greatest connectors, but only if someone is brave enough to make the first journey. Among the earliest of these desert highways to be etched into the map of human ambition was the Incense Trail. It unfurled from the fertile highlands of southern Arabia, where the rare frankincense and myrrh trees grew, all the way to the bustling ports of the Mediterranean. For centuries, the secret of cultivating these aromatic resins was guarded as fiercely as any treasure. The sap, harvested from gnarled trees in the Dhofar region, hardened into tears that, when burned, released a fragrance believed to carry prayers to the heavens. This was not merely a pleasant scent, it was a spiritual necessity for temples and rituals across the ancient world, from the pharaohs of Egypt to the forums of Rome. The journey of this sacred commodity was an epic in itself. Massive camel caravans, sometimes numbering thousands of animals, would depart from legendary cities like Shabwa. They did not travel a single road but a network of paths, a web of survival strung between rare oases. These watering holes, such as the magnificent city of Petra, carved directly into rose-red cliffs, were not just rest stops. They were cosmopolitan hubs where languages mingled and cultures collided. Here, Sabaean merchants from the south would meet Nabatean traders, the masters of the northern desert, who then bargained with Roman officials. Historians like Dr. Jane Smith point out that this constant interaction did more than move goods. It moved ideas, architectural styles, and even gods. A strict social hierarchy governed the caravan itself. At the top were the wealthy merchants who financed the expedition, often remaining in the comfort of the city. On the ground, the caravan was led by a highly respected route master, a man who knew the location of every hidden spring and the signs of an approaching sandstorm. Then came the camel drivers, the guards, the guides, and the countless support staff, all moving in a coordinated, living machine across the void. The value of their cargo was so immense that it dictated the fate of nations. Control over a single oasis could make a kingdom rich, while losing it could mean economic collapse. Alliances were forged and wars were fought not just for land, but for a few miles of a profitable trail. This relentless demand for incense shows us that ancient trade was a force far greater than simple commerce. It was a current of power flowing through the desert sands. The wealth generated built Petra from rock and filled the kingdom of Saba with monumental dams. It drew the gaze of empires, tempting Rome to send armies into the desert in a futile attempt to control the source. The Incense Trail proves that a single commodity, desired by many, can sculpt the political landscape, build cities from nothing, and connect worlds that otherwise would have remained forever apart. But this Arabian route was not the only desert highway shaping the ancient world. To the east, another vast and silent expanse held secrets of its own. While the scent of incense drifted through Arabian deserts, a different kind of treasure was being hauled across an even vaster sea of sand. The Sahara's gold routes transformed the world's largest hot desert into a bustling corridor of commerce. For centuries, colossal caravans of camels, sometimes numbering 10,000 strong, undertook a journey of immense danger and even greater reward. They connected the incredibly rich gold fields of West Africa, in regions like Wangara, to the eager markets of North Africa, the Middle East, and ultimately Europe. This was not a simple path. It was a months-long trial by fire and sand. The primary goods flowing north were gold, ivory, and tragically, human beings captured and sold into slavery. What traveled south was just as vital: salt. In the forested kingdoms of the south, salt was worth its weight in gold for preserving food and sustaining life, while in the north, African gold would soon mint the currencies of rising European powers. This exchange of scarcity for luxury fueled the rise of legendary cities. Timbuktu was not just a trading post, it became a dazzling center of wealth and scholarship, its famous Sankore University attracting thinkers from across the Muslim world. Gao, the capital of the Songhai Empire, grew into a metropolis of power and culture. As archaeologist Professor Ahmed Bello explains, it was control over this trade that enabled the meteoric rise of West Africa's great empires. The kingdoms of Ghana, Mali, and later Songhai did not just sit on gold mines, they mastered the logistics of the trade itself. They taxed every ounce of gold, every block of salt that passed through their territories, using that wealth to build formidable armies and stunning cities. But how did they conquer the desert itself? The logistical challenges were almost beyond comprehension. Crossing the Sahara meant navigating a world of relentless sun, shifting dunes, and sandstorms that could swallow an entire caravan. Navigation was a life or death skill. Guides used the sun by day and the stars by night, following constellations with intimate precision. They remembered the shapes of dunes and the rare rock formations that served as silent waypoints. Survival depended on a chain of oases which became the sites of fortified trading posts. These outposts, like the ancient city of Sijilmassa at the desert's northern edge, were more than rest stops. They were vital nodes of security and exchange, where goods were weighed, contracts were made, and cultures met. It was through these routes that Islam spread peacefully into West Africa, brought by merchants and scholars. This was not a conquest by the sword, but a gradual fusion of traditions. Rulers of the Mali Empire, most famously Mansa Musa, embraced Islam, and on his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca, he distributed so much gold in Cairo that its value plummeted for over a decade. This event single-handedly put West Africa on the map of the medieval world. The trans-Saharan routes stand as a powerful testament to a profound idea that deserts were never true barriers. They were bridges, formidable and demanding, but bridges nonetheless. They fostered connections in the most unlikely places, reshaping economies, religions, and the very destiny of continents. These way stations were not just buildings, they were lifelines carved from stone and ambition. Known as Caravanserais, these fortified inns dotted the trade routes at intervals of roughly one day's journey, creating a chain of safety across the most desolate landscapes. Their design was a masterclass in practical engineering. Imagine a large, square or rectangular structure with high, windowless outer walls to deter bandits. A single, heavy gate provided the only entrance, which was closed and guarded at night. Inside, a vast central courtyard allowed for the unloading and corralling of hundreds of camels, while a shaded arcade surrounded the space, offering individual rooms for merchants to sleep, store their goods, and conduct business. The true genius, however, lay in their water management systems. As architectural historian Dr. Lena Kovacs explains, caravanserais were often built with sophisticated underground canals, known as kanats, to channel water from distant aquifers or mountains. They featured massive, vaulted cisterns to collect and store precious rainwater, ensuring a reliable supply for both people and animals. These structures were built to endure, using thick mud, brick, or stone that provided natural insulation against the searing daytime heat and the freezing desert nights. Within these protective walls, a unique social world flourished. A caravanserai was a microcosm of the ancient world. A silk merchant from China might share a fire with a glassblower from Syria, while a storyteller from Persia captivated a crowd of travelers from 3 different continents. News traveled faster than any single caravan here. A merchant arriving from the west could report on political unrest or a new tariff, while a traveler from the east might bring word of a breakthrough in metalworking or a shift in fashion. This constant, fluid exchange of information was as valuable as any spice or gemstone. In this sense, the caravanserai functioned like an early international airport, a hub where diverse cultures and ideas landed, refueled, and took off again, forever changed by their brief interaction. The most famous of these, like the sprawling Ribat-e-Sharaf in Persia or the remote stops along the Taklamakan Desert Silk Road, were not just shelters. They were crucibles of human resilience and cultural fusion, the very nodes that kept the vast, silent network of desert trade alive and beating. The value of a single well in the desert was beyond measure. These oases were not merely stops on a map, they were the beating hearts of the entire network, transforming a deadly expanse into a navigable corridor. An oasis offered 3 irreplaceable gifts: fresh water, fresh food, and a chance for rest. For a caravan emerging from the blinding glare of the dunes, the sight of a palm grove was a vision of life itself. But these green islands were far more than just service stations. They evolved into bustling market towns and sophisticated agricultural hubs. Botanist Dr. Maria Gonzalez describes how these ecosystems were masterpieces of human ingenuity. The unique microclimate of an oasis, sheltered by surrounding hills, allowed for the cultivation of date palms, which in turn provided shade for lower-growing crops like citrus trees, vegetables, and grains. This created a layered, sustainable food system that could feed a local population and resupply thousands of passing travelers. The very existence of this agriculture in the middle of nothingness made long journeys possible. The discovery and control of these water sources dictated the flow of history. Some oases, like the legendary Siwa in western Egypt, were known for centuries for their sacred springs and strategic location. Others were smaller, secret wells known only to specific tribes, their locations guarded as fiercely as any treasure. The management of water was a science. Communities built intricate irrigation channels to distribute water from the central spring to every corner of the grove, ensuring that not a single drop was wasted. This careful stewardship meant that an oasis like Al-Hossa in eastern Arabia could become one of the largest in the world, supporting a vast population and becoming a major trading center in its own right. Here, goods from the entire region were bought and sold, from Arabian horses to Persian textiles. The control of such a place was a source of immense power and constant conflict. Kingdoms and empires fought bitterly over these strategic lifelines. To control an oasis was to control the trade route itself, to hold the power of life and death over every merchant who dared to cross. The story of the desert is in many ways the story of the struggle for its water. These hidden gardens prove that the most profound human achievements are often built not in spite of nature, but by finding and nurturing its hidden gifts. They turn the map of the desert from a blank space of terror into a web of known possibilities, where every well was a destination and every grove of trees was a promise of survival. Crossing 1,000 miles of identical dunes required more than courage. It demanded an intimate conversation with the cosmos. In a world without landmarks, the sky itself became the only reliable map. For the Al-Qobia, the revered desert guides, every journey was a celestial navigation. By night, their primary guide was the pole star, the one fixed point in the turning heavens. While other stars wheeled across the sky, this single, steadfast beacon held its position almost directly above the North Pole. A guide would measure its angle with a simple device like an astrolabe or even just his fist held at arm's length, calculating his latitude and confirming he was on the correct east-west corridor. The constellations were not just patterns, they were a clock and a compass, their movements telling the time and confirming direction long before the first mechanical timepiece was ever invented. When the sun rose, the methods shifted but the precision remained. Guides watched the length and direction of shadows cast by a staff planted in the sand. The shortest shadow of the day pointed unequivocally north, a solar compass available to anyone who knew how to read it. They also learned to read the desert itself, a language written in sand. The prevailing winds sculpted dunes into consistent shapes, and the Al-Qobia could discern the direction of those winds from the slope and alignment of the ridges. They observed the types of gravel underfoot and noted the rare, hardy plants that clung to life, each species hinting at the proximity of hidden water. As navigation expert Captain Robert Hayes explains, this knowledge was never written down. It was a living library passed orally from father to son, from master to apprentice, through poems, songs, and meticulous rote memorization. The loss of a single guide could mean the loss of an entire route for a generation. Let's place ourselves in their world for a moment. You are leading a caravan at dusk, the sun is gone and the stars are emerging. The wind has shifted, blurring the tracks of the previous caravan. How do you proceed? You first locate the pole star, confirming your general bearing. You then look for specific constellations that are just rising, their position telling you the exact time of night. You feel the texture of the sand under your feet, noting a shift from soft grains to harder packed gravel, a sign you are approaching a known dry riverbed that runs parallel to your route. Even the behavior of your camels becomes a tool. Their keen senses might detect a water source still miles away or become restless at the scent of a predator. This was not guesswork. It was a complex, multi-layered science honed over centuries. These traders were astronomers and geologists, reading the book of nature written in the stars and the sands. Their survival and the flow of civilizations depended on this sacred knowledge, a profound reminder that humanity's oldest connection is not to the ground beneath our feet, but to the infinite sky above. The true wealth of these desert highways was never measured in gold or spices alone. It was the intangible cargo of ideas that truly reshaped our world. A merchant's pack might carry silk, but nestled within the folds was a new philosophy, a revolutionary technology, or a faith that would change continents. The deserts, so often seen as empty and isolating, became the world's most unexpected melting pots. Consider the profound journey of Buddhism from its birthplace in India, across the towering peaks and into the deserts of Central Asia. It was along the harsh stretches of the Silk Road that this faith found new voices. Monks traveling with merchant caravans established monasteries in oasis towns like Dunhuang, which became great libraries of thought. But Buddhism did not simply arrive in China unchanged. As it moved, it absorbed the colors and flavors of every culture it touched. In Central Asia, Buddhist art took on Greco-Roman influences, creating the serene, classical Buddhas of Gandhara. By the time it reached China, it had blended with Taoist and Confucian ideas, evolving into new schools like Chan, which would later become Zen in Japan. This was not a conquest, but a conversation across the sands. Anthropologist Dr. Anya Petrova explains that this process created syncretic cultures, unique fusions where local traditions and foreign influences became inseparable. You can see this fusion in the very script used to record history. In West Africa, the arrival of Muslim traders and scholars did not erase local languages. Instead, communities adopted the Arabic alphabet to write their own tongues, giving rise to a rich literary tradition in Ajami script, which preserved local poetry, legal texts, and histories in a new form. This was not a replacement of culture, but an expansion of its tools. Similarly, a monumental technological transfer occurred when the secret of papermaking, guarded by China for centuries, traveled west after a pivotal battle in the 8th century. Chinese papermakers captured in Tolas in modern-day Kazakhstan brought their craft to the Islamic world. From cities like Samarkand, papermaking spread rapidly, replacing fragile papyrus and expensive parchment. This cheaper, more durable material fueled an explosion of literacy, scholarship, and administration from Baghdad to Cordoba, preserving the works of ancient Greeks and paving the way for the European Renaissance. The desert caravans carried the very medium that would record human knowledge for a millennium. These routes were a living network, constantly exchanging the DNA of civilization. A new style of ceramic glaze perfected in Persia could appear in a workshop in Egypt within a generation. A musical instrument from Mesopotamia could find its way into a court in the Indus Valley. This was a world where commerce and connection were two sides of the same coin, proving that when people trade, they do not merely exchange objects, they inevitably begin to share a part of their soul. A single peppercorn was once worth more than gold. This humble berry, harvested from the vines of India's Malabar coast, fueled an economic frenzy that reached all the way to the dining tables of ancient Rome. Roman nobles would sprinkle this exotic, pungent spice on their food as the ultimate display of wealth, while historians like Pliny the Elder lamented how the empire's treasury was being drained to satisfy the insatiable demand for Eastern luxuries. The journey of pepper is a perfect example of how a simple good could reshape the world. It traveled west along a complex chain, passing through the hands of Indian merchants, Persian middlemen, and Arab caravan masters before finally reaching Mediterranean ports. The immense profits from this trade financed new ships, encouraged riskier voyages, and ultimately spurred the European age of exploration, as nations sought to bypass the expensive desert and sea middlemen to find the source themselves. But pepper was just one thread in a vast tapestry of transformative goods. Consider the profound impact of Chinese silk. When this shimmering, lightweight fabric first reached Rome, it caused a sensation. The Romans, who had only known heavy wool and linen, were captivated by a material that felt like woven air. They believed silk was harvested from trees and called the Chinese the seers, the silk people. The demand for this mysterious cloth was so powerful that it gave the entire network of routes its name, the Silk Road. Yet silk was more than a fashion statement. Its production was a state secret guarded by China for centuries, a monopoly that brought immense wealth and prestige. The techniques for sericulture, the cultivation of silkworms, were so valuable that when the secret finally leaked out, it was said to have been smuggled by monks who hid silkworm eggs in hollowed-out walking sticks. This single act of industrial espionage broke China's monopoly and spread silk production across the globe, creating new industries from Byzantium to Italy. Another good that colored the course of history was Lapis Lazuli. This intensely blue stone, mined from a single remote valley in Afghanistan, was treasured from Egypt to Mesopotamia. Ground into a priceless pigment known as ultramarine, it was used to paint the robes of the Virgin Mary in Renaissance masterpieces, its cost often exceeding that of the gold leaf used alongside it. The value placed on this specific shade of blue dictated artistic conventions for centuries and created a trade route that spanned mountains and deserts. Economic historian Dr. James Lee emphasizes that these goods were not passive objects of trade. They were active forces that drove innovation. The need to move vast quantities of gold from West Africa led to the development of sophisticated banking and credit systems, as merchants could not possibly carry enough currency for their transactions. Letters of credit, an early form of the check, were invented so a merchant could deposit money in one city and withdraw it in another, thousands of miles away. The desire for spices and silks spurred advancements in cartography, ship design, and navigation, pushing the boundaries of what was known about the world. The cinnamon in your kitchen cabinet and the color of a classic painting are all connected to those ancient caravans. These commodities were the sparks that ignited new industries, funded empires, and connected human creativity across impossible distances. They prove that the most powerful cargo is not what fills a ship's hold, but what captures the human imagination. The Silk Road's most formidable challenges were not its towering mountain passes, but the silent, sun-scorched deserts that lay between them. While the romance of the route often focuses on the steppes, its desert legs across Central Asia and the Middle East were the true crucibles of commerce. Here, caravans connecting legendary cities like Samarkand and Baghdad faced a dual adversary: the relentless environment and the complex politics of the tribes who controlled the sands. Historian Dr. Y. Zhang notes that the rewards for crossing these voids were so immense that merchants willingly braved temperatures that swung from blistering days to freezing nights. Their success depended entirely on a fragile, unspoken pact with the desert's inhabitants. Intermediary tribes, such as the Sogdians in Central Asia, did not simply demand tolls, they became indispensable partners. They provided the expert guides, the camels bred for endurance, and the security needed to cross their territories. In return, they gained wealth, prestige, and a vital connection to the global flow of goods and ideas. This symbiotic relationship turned the desert from an impassable barrier into a guarded gateway. The very harshness of this environment has become a gift to modern archaeology. The dry, sterile air of the Taklamakan Desert, whose name ominously translates to "once you go in, you never come out," acted as a perfect preservative. In long-lost cities buried by the shifting sands, archaeologists have uncovered vibrant textiles, their colors still brilliant after 2,000 years. They have found delicate silk paintings depicting celestial beings and everyday life. Most remarkably, they have recovered libraries of manuscripts in a dozen languages, from Buddhist sutras on paper to Zoroastrian prayers on parchment, all saved from decay by the desert's arid embrace. These fragile pages, found in oasis towns like Dunhuang and Turpan, tell a story not just of trade, but of profound cultural exchange, where religions mingled and philosophies were translated and debated. A single scrap of paper preserved in the sand can reveal more about the connections between a Chinese merchant and a Persian administrator than any imperial record. The desert demanded a heavy price for passage, but in return, it safeguarded the very evidence of that epic journey, offering us a treasure far greater than any single shipment of silk or spices. The legend of Ubar haunted explorers for centuries, a city of unparalleled wealth said to have been swallowed by the desert as punishment for its sins. Known as the Atlantis of the Sands, this fabled hub of the frankincense trade was mentioned in the Quran and Arabian folklore, a place of towering buildings and immense treasure that vanished without a trace. For generations, scholars debated whether it was pure myth or a historical reality lost to the sands. The breakthrough came not from a lone adventurer with a map, but from the cold, analytical eye of technology. Satellite imagery taken from space revealed a startling pattern in the remote deserts of Oman, the ghostly outlines of ancient caravan tracks converging on a single point, like spokes on a wheel. These faint trails, invisible from the ground, led archaeologists directly to a site known as Shisar. Excavations there uncovered the ruins of a massive fortress, with 8-sided walls and towers that had collapsed into a cavern below. Archaeologist Dr. George Fenton explains that geological surveys confirmed the city's dramatic end. The very foundation of Ubar was a large limestone cavern, which had provided a natural reservoir of water, the source of its life and wealth. For generations, the people of Ubar drew water from this underground source to sustain their population and the countless camels of the incense caravans. But this bounty came with a hidden fragility. The constant drawing of water, combined with the natural erosion of the limestone, likely caused the cavern's roof to collapse, plunging the heart of the city into the earth in a catastrophic sinkhole. The myths of divine punishment were an attempt to explain a very real geological and human disaster. The artifacts pulled from the ruins tell a story of a city deeply connected to the global trade network. They found fragments of Roman pottery, Indian beads, and evidence of metalworking, all clustered around what was once a bustling caravanserai. Yet the most poignant find is the sheer depth of the collapse itself, a stark reminder that the most precious resource in the desert is not gold or incense, but water. The fate of Ubar is a powerful cautionary tale that echoes into our present. It speaks to the delicate balance between human ambition and environmental limits. A society built on a non-renewable resource, whether it is an ancient water cavern or a modern aquifer, walks a fine line between prosperity and peril. The city did not vanish in a single mythical cataclysm, but through a slow, steady strain on the very system that supported it. Its crumbling walls are a monument to a simple, unyielding truth. that in the desert every well has a bottom. Deep in the heart of the Libyan desert, a kingdom once flourished against all odds. The Garamantes were not mere nomads, they were a formidable civilization that built a network of cities where only sand should have been. Their secret was hidden beneath their feet, a labyrinth of underground tunnels called fagaras. These were not simple wells, but horizontal mines dug with incredible precision to tap into fossil water, ancient aquifers that had been trapped underground for millennia. The Garamantes engineered thousands of miles of these tunnels, gently sloped so that groundwater would flow by gravity to the surface, creating a man-made river in the void. This hydraulic miracle transformed the desolate valleys of the Fezzan into a breadbasket of vineyards, wheat fields, and date palms, sustaining a population that may have numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Their capital, Garama, stood as a testament to this engineered prosperity, a city of stone buildings and a complex social structure that dominated the central Sahara for over 1,000 years. Their wealth was built on trade, commanding the routes that carried salt from the desert interior to the African coast, and tragically, transporting enslaved people from the south to the markets of the Roman world. They were the masters of a hidden world, a civilization born from water pulled from the stone, yet today their cities are ghosts, their fields buried. What could possibly have brought down such an ingenious society? According to historian Dr. Fatima Al-Mansouri, the answer lies in the very source of their power. The Garamantes were living on borrowed time, mining a finite resource. Each fagara they dug provided life for a century or two, but the fossil water they tapped was not being replenished. As their population grew, they dug more tunnels, draining the aquifer faster than it could ever recover. The water table began a slow, irreversible decline. Tunnels that once gushed with water became trickles and then ran dry. The green valleys slowly shrank, forcing communities to abandon outlying farms and retreat toward the dying heart of the kingdom. This environmental pressure was compounded by a shifting economic landscape. New maritime routes began to bypass the trans-Saharan caravans, diminishing the flow of wealth that had funded their society. The Garamantes found themselves squeezed between a desert reclaiming its water and a world that was finding new paths around them. Their eventual decline was not a sudden collapse, but a long, slow fading. The clues to their story are etched into the landscape, in the lines of dry irrigation channels and the ruins of forts that once guarded empty trade roads. Roman historians like Pliny wrote of the Garamantes as a powerful, warlike people, but later accounts fade into silence. Their disappearance is a stark lesson in sustainability. It shows us that even the most advanced engineering cannot indefinitely defy the limits of nature. They were a brilliant flash in the desert night, a reminder that every oasis, natural or built by human hands, has a lifespan dictated by the delicate balance between what we take and what the earth can give. The parched sands of the Taklamakan hold a secret that rewrites our map of the ancient world. In the silent, salt-crusted earth, archaeologists uncovered mummies so perfectly preserved by the dry air that their tattoos remained visible and their facial features were startlingly clear. These were not the East Asian faces one might expect, but individuals with brown hair, long noses, and fair-skinned Caucasian features frozen in time for over 4,000 years. The most famous of them, the so-called Beauty of Lulan, was buried with a simple woven basket and a feather in her felt hat, her peaceful repose belying a revolutionary truth. Her presence, and that of others like the Churchian man with his intricate red spiraling tattoos, suggests a transcontinental connection far older and more profound than anyone had dreamed. How did these people from the West come to be here, in what is now Western China, millennia before the famous Silk Road was ever established? geneticist Dr. Liu Wei and his team have analyzed the DNA from these remains, confirming a direct genetic link to populations from the Black Sea region and Western Asia. This was not a single lost expedition, but a sustained migration, a thread of European ancestry woven into the very fabric of prehistoric Central Asia. Their daily lives, revealed by the artifacts buried with them, show a sophisticated and adaptable culture. They wore brightly colored woolen textiles, woven in complex twill patterns that would not be seen in Europe for another 2,000 years. They possessed bronze tools and medicinal herbs like ephedra, indicating a knowledge of metallurgy and healing. They were not primitive wanderers, they were well-equipped pastoralists, likely herding sheep and cattle, who had mastered the challenges of the desert fringe. The routes they traveled remain one of archaeology's great puzzles. They might have moved along the fringes of the towering Tibetan plateau, following river valleys that once flowed more abundantly from the melting glaciers of the last ice age. Another possibility is that they came from the north, skirting the Tian Shan Mountains. Wherever their paths led, their journey was intentional and repeated, establishing a proto-route that would later be formalized into the Silk Road. Their very existence challenges the traditional narrative of ancient China developing in isolation. It points to a Bronze Age world that was already in motion, with ideas, technologies, and people flowing across the vast inner expanse of Eurasia. The evidence they left behind is a silent testament to this early exchange. The grains of wheat found in their settlements were not native to the region, but domesticated in the West. The woven plaid pattern of a pair of tartan leggings found on one mummy echoes textile traditions from Celtic Europe. These were not just isolated objects, they were pieces of a cultural package carried across the continent. The Taklamakan mummies force us to confront a startling idea that the deserts we see as barriers were, for these resilient people, a connective tissue. Their story pushes back the clock on globalization, revealing a deeply interconnected ancient world where a woman from the shores of the Black Sea could live, die, and be laid to rest on the edge of what would become China, her final resting place, a permanent bridge between two worlds. The true power of Petra was not carved in its rose-red cliffs, but channeled through its hidden veins of water. In a land where rain was a rare and fleeting event, the Nabateans performed a kind of hydrological magic, transforming their desert capital into a lush, defensible stronghold. Their entire society was engineered around a single, brilliant principle to capture every drop. When the rare desert storms did come, they were often violent deluges that could cause devastating flash floods. Instead of letting this water rage through the narrow Sick Canyon and wash away their city, the Nabateans built a masterpiece of control. They constructed massive dams to divert the floodwaters and a complex network of channels and terracotta pipes that line the canyon walls, guiding the precious resource into the heart of Petra. Hydraulic engineer Dr. Omar Khalid points out that these were not just simple canals. The Nabateans understood gradient and pressure, crafting a gravity-fed system that distributed water efficiently across the city, from the highest royal palaces to the lowest artisan workshops. The water was then stored in vast hidden cisterns, some carved directly into the bedrock and sealed with waterproof plaster. These reservoirs were so numerous and so well designed that historians estimate Petra could support a population of 30,000 people, a staggering number for such an arid environment. This was not a passive collection of rainwater, it was an active, managed hydraulic system. Maintaining this network was a constant, vital effort. A dedicated class of engineers and laborers would continuously inspect and clean the channels, ensuring that no crack went unrepaired and no segment became blocked by silt or debris. This was a society that understood its survival depended on the integrity of its pipes and dams. Their mastery of water was the direct source of their economic power. Every caravan arriving at Petra was not just paying a tax to pass through, it was paying for the privilege of life itself, for access to fresh water and fodder for their animals in the middle of a barren landscape. This ability to provide sustenance and security is what made Petra the indispensable hub of the Incense Trail. It allowed the Nabateans to dictate terms and amass incredible wealth, all flowing from their command of a resource more valuable than any spice. So why was such transformative knowledge eventually lost? The decline was a slow unraveling. As Roman influence grew and maritime routes began to bypass the desert caravans, Petra's economic importance gradually faded. With less wealth flowing into the city, the resources and skilled labor needed to maintain the intricate water systems dwindled. A major earthquake in the 4th century damaged crucial infrastructure, and without the collective will and expertise to rebuild it, the system began to fail. Channels clogged, cisterns cracked, and the desert slowly reclaimed its authority. The Nabateans did not vanish, but their most profound innovation, the engineered landscape that defied the desert, was swallowed by silence. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that the greatest empires are not always built on conquest, but on the ability to sustain life where it seems impossible. They proved that in the desert, the ultimate form of control is not held by the army with the most swords, but by the civilization that knows where the water flows. A silent conversation is etched across the desert rocks of Arabia. For centuries, the Thamudic people carved their stories directly into the stone landscape, leaving behind countless inscriptions in a script that remains only partially understood today. These are not the grand proclamations of kings, but the personal marks of nomadic traders and herders, a cryptic record of their daily existence. They drew detailed camels, recorded their names, and noted simple commercial transactions, proving that even the most transient lives sought a form of permanence. Epigrapher Dr. Sarah Jenkins explains that Thamudic script was not a single, static language. It evolved over hundreds of years, with regional variations that eventually fed into the development of the Arabic alphabet we know today. Deciphering these messages is a painstaking puzzle. Scholars work like detectives, comparing known symbols with later scripts and using context from the drawings that often accompany the text. A carving of a camel next to a name might indicate ownership, while a list of goods followed by a number could be a trader's informal ledger. These personal notes, when viewed collectively, form a vast, distributed ledger of desert life. They reveal the routes these people traveled, the gods they prayed to for safe passage, and the social bonds that held their communities together in an unforgiving world. How do these intimate carvings connect to the grand sweep of history? A simple inscription mentioning a trade with a merchant from a distant oasis is a data point, confirming the reach and frequency of contact between far-flung groups. When the content of these messages suddenly shifts, or when certain routes stop being mentioned, it can signal a larger political upheaval or a drought that forced populations to move. The Thamudic inscriptions function as an ancient social media feed, a stream of consciousness from the desert itself. Each carving is a status update, a personal declaration that says, "I was here, I did this, I belong." They offer a raw, unfiltered window into the minds of the very people who kept the wheels of desert commerce turning, reminding us that history is not just made by empires and armies, but by the countless individual journeys etched in stone. Scattered across the vast emptiness of the Kaiselkum Desert, stone walls crumble under a relentless sun. These are the abandoned fortresses of the Silk Road, silent sentinels that once buzzed with the voices of merchants and the bells of camel trains. Their very presence was a promise of safety in a treacherous land. A typical fortress was a self-contained world, a square of towering ramparts made from packed earth and sun-dried bricks, with watchtowers offering a panoramic view of the approaching plains. Inside, a labyrinth of rooms housed barracks for soldiers, storerooms for goods, and lodgings for weary travelers. The air would have been thick with the smells of cooking fires, animal sweat, and exotic spices. For a caravan emerging from the dunes, the sight of these battlements was a profound relief, a symbol of order and protection in the wild. Archaeologist Dr. Vladimir Petrov has spent decades excavating these sites, and the artifacts he uncovers tell a vivid story of daily life. He finds Chinese coins alongside Persian ceramics and Sogdian religious texts near Roman glassware. A single storage jar might still contain traces of sesame seeds or pepper, a direct link to the global pantry that passed through these gates. But the most telling finds are often the simplest: a child's wooden toy left in a corner, a broken comb, a cooking hearth filled with ashes. These objects whisper of families, of communities that grew around the fortress walls, creating a small, vibrant oasis of human activity sustained entirely by the flow of trade. So why were these vital hubs ultimately left to the sand and the wind? The evidence points not to a single cataclysm, but to a slow unraveling. Core samples taken from nearby lake beds reveal a prolonged period of drought that began around the 10th century. As water sources dwindled, the land could no longer support the large populations and the countless camels needed to sustain the caravan traffic. Political instability was the second blow. As great empires like the Tang in China and the Abbasids in the Middle East weakened, their ability to project power and protect these remote outposts faded. Banditry increased, making the journeys too dangerous, and the insurance costs for merchants became prohibitive. Finally, the world simply found a better way. The rise of secure maritime routes meant that a ship could carry 1,000 times the cargo of a camel caravan at a fraction of the risk and cost. The trade that was the lifeblood of the desert fortresses slowly diverted to the sea, leaving them isolated and economically irrelevant. We can imagine the final years, a slow quieting. Fewer caravans arrived each season. The garrison grew smaller. Families began to move away in search of opportunity. One day, the last guard closed the heavy gates for a final time, and the desert silence, held at bay for centuries, rushed back in. Their empty shells are a powerful monument to a simple truth: that the most imposing walls cannot withstand the shifting currents of climate and commerce. They stand as a warning that no node in the great network of human connection is permanent. Scattered among the pale sands of the Libyan desert lie shards of pure yellow glass, polished by the wind to a gem-like finish. This is not the work of any human glassblower, but a celestial gift forged in an instant of unimaginable violence. Geologist Dr. Hannah Brown explains that the leading theory points to a massive meteorite impact or a scorching airburst, an explosion in the sky so intense it fused the very desert sand into glass 29 million years ago. The energy required was beyond comprehension, instantly vaporizing rock and metal and raining this strange, translucent material back to Earth. The exact nature of the event is still debated, with some scientists favoring a ground impact and others a Tunguska-like aerial blast, but the result was the same: a field of natural glass stretching for miles. For the prehistoric peoples who later wandered this landscape, finding these smooth, lustrous stones must have seemed like discovering pieces of the sun itself. They had no knowledge of meteorites, yet they recognized the inherent value and beauty of this material. They carefully knapped the glass into tools and, more strikingly, into exquisite jewelry. A pendant carved from Libyan desert glass was found in the burial of the pharaoh Tutankhamun, a scarab beetle resting on his chest that had begun its existence as a cataclysm. This single artifact traces a trade route of the marvelous, connecting a pharaoh's tomb to a cosmic event in a distant desert. How did ancient cultures make sense of such a phenomenon? Without a scientific framework, they wove the glass into their mythology. It was likely seen as a divine substance, perhaps the physical remnant of a lightning bolt cast down by a god, or the frozen tears of the sun. Its very existence, so out of place in the natural world, demanded a story. This transformation from a force of destruction into an object of commerce and spiritual significance is a profound human impulse. A terrifying event that scarred the landscape became, over millennia, a source of beauty and connection. The journey of a single piece of desert glass from a fiery sky to a trader's pouch to a royal amulet shows us that our ancestors were not just trading materials, they were trading mysteries. They incorporated the cosmos into their daily lives, finding value and meaning in the scars left by the heavens on the earth. The silent guardians of the desert were not made of stone, but of parchment and paper. In the heart of trade cities like Timbuktu, and within the secluded caves of Silk Road oases like Dunhuang, vast libraries thrived, preserving the intellectual wealth of entire civilizations. These were not mere storehouses, but vibrant scriptoria where scholars and scribes worked tirelessly by lamplight, copying texts to ensure their survival. The desert's dry climate was a natural ally, protecting fragile pages from the decay that would have claimed them in more humid lands. For centuries, these collections stood as beacons of knowledge in the wilderness, safeguarding everything from advanced astronomical charts and medical encyclopedias to poignant poetry and intricate philosophical debates. Historian Dr. Aisha Menz explains that the very existence of these libraries was a direct result of the trade routes. The wealth generated from moving silk and gold funded the pursuit of knowledge, while the constant flow of people brought new ideas that demanded to be written down, copied, and debated. A merchant caravan carried more than spices. It carried the latest scientific treatise from Baghdad or a newly translated commentary from a Greek philosopher, all destined for the copying tables of a desert library. Yet this intellectual sanctuary was perpetually fragile. The same connections that built these libraries also made them targets. Periods of war and political unrest led to looting and deliberate destruction, as conquering armies sought to erase the cultural memory of their rivals. Neglect was an even more insidious thief. As trade routes shifted and a city's fortunes declined, the funds to maintain these collections dried up. Precious manuscripts were left to the mercy of the elements, sometimes hidden away in sealed caves or buried in chests beneath the sand by caretakers hoping for a safer future. The contents of these libraries reveal a world in constant conversation. You could find a Jewish merchant's personal diary written in Arabic script, a Buddhist sutra translated from Sanskrit into Uyghur, and a detailed map of the stars from a Persian observatory, all within the same collection. The trade in books and ideas moved along the exact same paths as the trade in goods, proving that the most valuable cargo was always knowledge. Modern recovery efforts are a race against time. Teams of scholars and conservators work meticulously in Timbuktu to restore manuscripts damaged by humidity and pests, while digital archivists use high-resolution scanners to create virtual copies of texts from the Dunhuang caves, making them accessible to the world. Each salvaged page is a rescued voice from the past, a testament to the enduring human desire to record, to learn, and to connect across the vast, silent sands. Stretching for kilometers across the arid plains, immense V-shaped structures of piled stone seem to trace strange patterns on the earth. From the ground, these formations called desert kites are almost impossible to comprehend, their scale too vast for the human eye. It is only from the air that their true design becomes clear, revealing a sophisticated and ancient technology. For decades, the leading theory was that these were massive animal traps, with the long, converging walls funneling herds of gazelle or ibex toward a central enclosure or a hidden pit. Yet the sheer number of these structures and their specific placement has led researchers like Dr. Youssef Al-Hassan to a more complex conclusion. He suggests that while hunting was one function, the kites were also profound symbols in the landscape, serving as territorial markers and crucial navigational aids for the earliest trade caravans. Constructed over 5,000 years ago by piling local limestone into low walls, a single kite could take a community years to build, a colossal investment of labor. Why would they expend such effort? The answer lies in the view from above. When you map their locations, many kites are positioned along the very corridors that would later become formalized trade routes. Their distinctive, angular shapes visible from high ground would have acted as a kind of primitive billboard signaling to nomadic groups, this land is claimed or this way leads to water. They transformed a featureless expanse into a mapped and managed territory. Imagine a herder or a trader moving through this rocky wilderness. Spotting the familiar silhouette of a kite on the horizon would provide immediate orientation, a known point in an otherwise unknown world. It was a permanent signpost in a landscape of shifting sands. The kites were more than tools, they were a language of stone written across the desert, a declaration of human presence and control. They demonstrate that long before the first camel caravans, our ancestors were already engineering the environment, not just for survival, but to facilitate connection and communication across the void. This ancient ingenuity raises a haunting question: what other forgotten networks, invisible from the ground, are still waiting to be seen from a new perspective? The silence of the desert was not broken by wind alone, but by the rhythmic, metallic chime of bronze bells. Legends whispered that each caravan carried these talismans, their sound a protective shield against the jinn and malevolent spirits believed to haunt the empty spaces. More than mere superstition, these bells were inscribed with intricate symbols, eyes and hands meant to reflect evil back into the sands. For the traders and camel drivers, the constant, gentle ringing was a psychological anchor, a familiar sound that cut through the oppressive quiet and the groans of the shifting earth. Ethnographer Dr. Clara Rossi proposes that their function was deeply practical. In a world without landmarks, especially during sandstorms or moonless nights, the sound of a bell from a nearby caravan could be a lifeline. It created an auditory trail, a beacon of companionship that prevented groups from becoming separated and lost in the void. The mystery deepens because so few of these bells have ever been recovered by archaeologists. They were prized possessions, likely passed down through families and rarely lost or discarded. The few examples found, often in the ruins of a caravanserai or near a forgotten oasis, are small and finely made. Their clappers are worn smooth from a lifetime of motion, and their inscriptions, though faded, still show the outlines of protective charms. This fusion of sound and superstition reveals a profound human truth. The traders were masters of logistics, but they were also vulnerable people facing immense psychological strain. The bells provided a sense of control, a way to actively push back against the unknown dangers they could not see. They turned a terrifying journey into a ritual where every step was accompanied by a ring that said, "We are here, we are together, and we are warded." In the featureless expanse, that sound was a map for the soul, a tiny, ringing declaration of courage against the overwhelming silence. The climate itself was a merchant, a king, and a destroyer of worlds. Long before modern debates, the ancient trade networks lived and died by the planet's shifting moods. The very ground beneath the caravans was not a constant, but a stage for climatic dramas that could open a continent for commerce or seal it shut for centuries. Climate scientist Dr. Kenji Tanaka reads this history not in scrolls but in mud and pollen. By extracting deep core samples from ancient lake beds, he can reconstruct the world the traders knew. The pollen of specific grasses and trees preserved in sediment layers tells a clear story of when a region was lush and when it turned to dust. This data reveals a Sahara that was once unrecognizable. During a period known as the Green Sahara, from roughly 8,000 to 4,000 years ago, the desert bloomed. Vast grasslands supported rivers and lakes, attracting herds of animals and the human communities that followed them. This was not a desert at all, but a savanna, a green bridge that allowed for movement and cultural exchange between North and Central Africa with an ease that would later become impossible. Then the climate shifted, the rains retreated, the vegetation withered, and the sands advanced. The green corridor vanished, forcing human populations to either migrate to the Nile Valley, helping to spark the rise of Egyptian civilization, or to adapt to a much harsher reality. The trade routes did not disappear, but they transformed entirely, consolidating into the brutal but viable paths between the few remaining oases, a network born from scarcity. A similar story unfolded on the Arabian Peninsula. The Rub al-Khali, or the Empty Quarter, is today the largest continuous sand desert on Earth, a sea of dunes considered impassable for ancient caravans. But core samples and archaeological evidence suggest it was not always so empty. There were periods of increased rainfall that created lakes and supported pockets of vegetation. During these wetter phases, routes may have cut directly through this now forbidding interior, offering more direct paths for the lucrative incense trade. When the climate dried again, these interior paths were the first to be abandoned. The trade in frankincense was forced to cling to the fringes of the peninsula, relying entirely on a precarious chain of coastal oases and mountain wells. This shift concentrated immense power and wealth in the hands of those who controlled these remaining lifelines, kingdoms like Saba and Hadramaut. What does this tell us about the traders themselves? They were not passive victims of their environment, but brilliant strategists of resilience. A route did not simply vanish, it migrated. When one oasis failed, they would pioneer a new path to the next available water source, no matter how difficult. They adapted their entire logistical model to the changing world, altering the size of their caravans, the types of goods they could carry, and the timing of their journeys to match the new seasonal patterns. Their survival depended on a deep, generational memory of the land's fickle nature. This ancient interplay between climate and commerce holds a stark lesson for our own interconnected world. It demonstrates that the most sophisticated human networks are always, ultimately, tethered to the environment. The rise and fall of deserts remind us that the routes of global connection are not fixed lines on a map, but living, breathing entities that pulse with the heartbeat of the planet itself. The most enduring legacy of the desert trade was not the cargo itself, but the ingenious technologies born from the need to move it. Necessity became the mother of invention on a continental scale. A pivotal breakthrough was the North African camel saddle, a design so effective it reshaped economics. Unlike earlier pads, this was a rigid, framed structure that sat squarely on the animal's back, distributing weight evenly and allowing a single camel to carry hundreds of pounds more than before. This single innovation transformed the scale of trade, turning a trickle of luxury items into a river of commodities. Historian of technology Dr. Elena Popova explains that these were not inventions conceived in isolation. They were direct adaptations to the desert's brutal logic, born from centuries of observation and shared problem-solving among diverse cultures. The challenge of navigation spurred a parallel evolution in tools. The simple astrolabe, a device for measuring the stars' angles, was refined by Arab astronomers into a sophisticated portable computer made of brass, capable of calculating prayer times and latitude. This complex instrument then traveled along the very routes it helped to navigate, reaching Europe where it would guide sailors across oceans. Water management saw similar leaps. The leather waterskin was a start, but traders in the Middle East developed the goatskin bag, treated with oils to be more durable and less prone to leaking on a long, jostling journey. In Persia, the yakchul or ice pit was perfected. These were massive, domed structures with underground storage spaces, using wind catchers and thick walls to keep ice frozen even in the summer heat, providing a reliable source of cold storage for food and medicine in trading cities. Even the textiles that clothed the caravans were a product of this cross-cultural exchange. The tough, tightly woven wool tents of the Bedouins, designed to repel sand and withstand gales, incorporated weaving techniques that may have originated in Central Asia. The demand for lighter, more breathable fabrics for travel in scorching climates encouraged innovations in linen and cotton production in Egypt and India, techniques that then spread westward. These were not just tools for merchants. The camel saddle's design influenced how packs were carried everywhere. Improved water storage methods filtered down to village wells. Better textiles became available to common people. This cycle of innovation shows that the true product of these ancient highways was progress itself, a relentless current of practical genius flowing from one oasis to the next, forever changing how humanity lives. A fistful of cowrie shells could buy a man's dinner or a kingdom's allegiance. These small, glossy shells from the Indian Ocean became one of the world's first truly global currencies, traveling thousands of miles to be used as money in the markets of West Africa. Their value lay in their beauty, durability, and the sheer difficulty of obtaining them so far inland, making them impossible to counterfeit locally. Yet cowries were just one thread in a complex tapestry of desert finance. In the bustling souks of North Africa, transactions were sealed with the ring of silver coins minted in distant empires, while deep in the Sahara, salt was literally worth its weight in gold, cut into standardized bricks that served as both commodity and currency. This was a world of incredible economic flexibility, where value was not a fixed number but a negotiated reality, shifting with the length of the journey, the politics of the region, and the immediate needs of the people involved. Economic anthropologist Dr. Ben Carter highlights that the bedrock of this entire system was not metal or salt, but something far more intangible: trust. Caravan leaders and merchants from different cultures and faiths operated on an elaborate system of credit. A trader from Cairo might provide goods to a partner in Timbuktu with the understanding that payment, plus a share of the profit, would be delivered a year later after the grueling round trip was complete. There were no written contracts enforceable by law, only a handshake and a reputation that was more valuable than any single shipment. To break such a trust was to be excluded from the network forever. This necessity gave rise to the earliest bankers, the money changers who set up tables in major caravan cities. These experts did more than just swap one currency for another. They assessed the purity of metal coins, verified the authenticity of foreign currencies, and issued letters of credit. A merchant could deposit his earnings with a money changer in one city, receive a coded letter, and then present that letter to the money changer's partner in another city, thousands of miles away, to reclaim his wealth in the local currency. This brilliant innovation meant that vast sums of value could move across continents without a single coin ever needing to be physically carried through bandit-infested dunes. These financial systems built a profound economic interdependence. The gold mines of West Africa needed North African salt to preserve food and sustain their populations. The Mediterranean world craved West African gold to mint its coins and fuel its economies. The entire arrangement was a delicate dance of mutual need, a supply chain that stretched across the most formidable geography on Earth. The evolution of desert currencies, from simple barter to sophisticated credit, shows us that the foundations of our modern global economy were not laid in London or Wall Street, but in the dust of ancient caravanserais, where trust was the most precious currency of all. A caravan was a society on the move, a floating city governed by its own strict, unwritten laws. At the top of this hierarchy stood the caravan master, a figure of immense authority and responsibility. His word was law, for he alone possessed the deep, generational knowledge of the routes, the hidden wells, and the shifting moods of the desert. Below him were the specialized guides, the al-Kobir, who could read the stars and the sands. Then came the merchants who financed the venture, often traveling alongside their goods, followed by the guards whose vigilance deterred bandits, and finally the vast support staff of camel drivers, cooks, and craftsmen who kept the entire operation alive. Sociologist Dr. Layla Abadi explains that what held this diverse group together was not just a chain of command, but a powerful code of conduct rooted in survival. The harshness of the desert enforced a brutal equality and a sacred duty of reciprocity. If a traveler from a rival tribe was found dying of thirst, the code demanded he be given water, for tomorrow the roles could be reversed. This was not mere charity, it was a pragmatic investment in the safety of all who dared to cross. Disputes were settled not in distant courts, but immediately around the evening fire. The caravan master acted as judge, hearing grievances and delivering rulings that prioritized the unity and forward momentum of the group over individual blame. A theft might be punished by a fine paid in goods, while a violent act could see a man abandoned at the next oasis, a sentence that often meant death. This justice was swift, final, and understood by all. Daily life was a rhythm of shared labor and shared respite. Meals were communal events, with food and water distributed according to a strict rationing system that ensured no one was left behind. The sound of grinding grain and the scent of baking flatbreads would mark the camps at dawn and dusk. Within this micro-society, identities of gender, ethnicity, and religion took on new dimensions. While leadership was often male, women frequently traveled as merchants in their own right or as part of family trading enterprises, their presence woven into the social fabric. Different ethnic groups, each with their own customs and languages, learned to cooperate through a pidgin tongue and the universal language of trade. A Muslim merchant might share a meal with a Zoroastrian counterpart, their prayers offered to different gods at the same hour under the same infinite sky. These caravans were extraordinary experiments in social cohesion, proving that when survival depends on cooperation, humanity can forge bonds strong enough to overcome any divide. A merchant's prayer rug was often his most carefully packed possession. These ancient trade routes did far more than transport silk and spices. They became the very arteries through which the world's great faiths pulsed and spread. Islam moved peacefully across the Sahara, not with armies, but with Berber merchants who shared verses from the Quran alongside bolts of cloth. Nestorian Christianity found its way deep into China, its stone crosses erected in market towns thousands of miles from Jerusalem. Buddhism, as we have seen, traveled from India to Central Asia and beyond, its monasteries rising at oasis stops where travelers could meditate and find solace. The desert itself, with its vast, silent emptiness, naturally invited spiritual reflection, transforming arduous journeys into pilgrimages of the soul. Theologian Dr. Samuel Jones emphasizes that the merchant was often the first and most effective missionary. A trader's honest dealing and pious demeanor could do more to attract converts than any formal sermon, weaving faith directly into the fabric of daily commerce. This integration was visible everywhere. Caravanserais frequently featured a small mosque or a chapel within their walls, a quiet room for prayer amidst the chaos of unloading camels and haggling over prices. An oasis was not just a source of water, but a sanctuary. The same spring that quenched physical thirst was often dedicated to a local deity or saint, becoming a sacred site where different traditions could meet and mingle. Here, a Zoroastrian fire priest might debate theology with a Buddhist monk, while a Muslim scholar listened intently, all of them sheltered by the same grove of date palms. This constant interaction demanded a degree of practical tolerance. While doctrinal purity was important to religious authorities back in the capitals, survival on the trail often required a more flexible approach. A caravan master could not afford to let religious differences fracture his company in the middle of a waterless stretch. Shared hardship fostered a unique ecumenism, a live and let live attitude that was essential for business and survival alike. This is not to say conflict was absent. Control over a holy site or a pilgrim route could be a source of immense political power and tension. Yet the sheer economic incentive to keep goods moving often acted as a powerful check on outright religious warfare. The spiritual legacy is etched into the landscape itself. Protective amulets, inscribed with verses from the Bible or the Quran, have been found in the ruins of caravanserais, tucked away with a trader's personal effects. Elaborate temples were constructed along the routes, funded by merchant guilds seeking divine favor for their ventures. A single desert path could be walked by a pilgrim seeking enlightenment, a merchant seeking profit, and a scholar seeking knowledge, their journeys inextricably linked by the common ground beneath their feet. This deep connection between commerce and belief reminds us that the most enduring cargo was never something that could be weighed on a scale, but was carried in the human heart. The same sands that buried these ancient highways are now giving up their secrets to the probing eyes of modern technology. Archaeologists no longer rely solely on shovels and intuition. They scan the vast emptiness from space, using satellite imagery to detect the faintest ghost of a path. These images reveal ancient caravan tracks and the outlines of mud brick walls invisible from the ground, guiding researchers to sites like the newly discovered trade outposts in the Saudi Arabian desert. There, teams use ground-penetrating radar to map buried structures without moving a single grain of sand, revealing the blueprint of a forgotten caravanserai or a merchant's home hidden for centuries. Each discovery is a data point that rewrites our map of the ancient world, proving the desert was far more connected than we ever believed. A single piece of pottery found at one of these remote sites, analyzed with techniques like residue analysis, can tell us what a trader ate 1,000 years ago and where the food was grown. These are not just isolated ruins, they are missing nodes in a global network, revealing the astonishing scale of ancient travel and commerce. The implications are profound, forcing historians to reconsider the pace and complexity of early globalization. The preservation and sharing of these fragile insights are as crucial as the discoveries themselves. Teams create digital twins of entire excavation sites, three-dimensional models that allow anyone in the world to virtually walk through a newly unearthed fortress. Museums use interactive displays to show how a simple shard of glass connects a meteorite impact in Libya to a pharaoh's tomb in Egypt. This public engagement turns dusty artifacts into a living, breathing story. The ongoing search demonstrates a powerful truth: the past is not a static relic. It is a dynamic, hidden landscape, and every technological advance gives us a new tool to listen for the echoes of caravans that still whisper just beneath the surface.